Hey there, all you creepers and reapers. Welcome to another episode of the Femme Fatalities. I'm your co-hostess, Anna, and I'm here with...
Hey, Grieflings and Frightlings, and it's Margaret and Anna. Do you like clowns?
Oh, sometimes yes, sometimes no. I guess it kind of depends on if they have an art to what they're doing. Pun intended! That's right, we're talking about none other than Terrifier 1, Terrifier 2, and Terrifier 3. So, before we get too far, there are some triggers. Sorry, this is right up my alley. I love body horror. There are some triggers. There's definitely lots and lots and lots and lots of body horror. In each film, there's always that one scene that you never forget. Clowns, dysfunctional family dynamics, abusive parents, parental loss, filial loss. A lot of tropes. I feel like in the first Terrifier, before we really have a lot of development of characters, a lot of tropes of things that young women should specifically not do. Almost kind of, I want to say, our female protagonists, in a sense, are almost anti-heroes, even though they're not meant to be, depending on how you look at it and from what perspective you're using. Margaret, have I forgotten anything?
Lots and lots of blood. And I feel like you're touching on, we can see the growth in these three movies. And the first one, the misogyny, the way society treats women. And we can start to see how that's starting to change, how women are starting to reclaim their power, step into their power as we get more of these films. And real quick before we jump in, I'm curious, do you have a favorite out of the three?
Yes, surprisingly, I really liked Terrifier 3. But I do have a penchant for holiday movies, so I think that's why. And with that, this movie, if you love Christmas movies, but you do not like horror movies, please do not go into this movie optimistic. You probably will get upset. You may vomit. You may be completely disgusted, but that's the point. It is a slasher movie. It's called that for a reason. There are themes that you associate with the holiday season that are completely turned on their head, and for good reason. This is who Art the Clown is. This is what he does. This is the type of behavior that we expect of him as art fans. But just putting that PSA out there. That's all. What about you? What's your favorite one?
I'm going to have to go with the first. I feel like the first is my favorite.
You know, the one scene in the first one, I think that just set the standard for all the movies.
Yes. I feel like introducing him, getting to know him, I think back to when he's in the restaurant and we're like, okay, wait, who is this guy? What is happening? And watching his sadistic growth to get to where we get to the third. And I'm curious, Art he sat in that rocking chair. So viewers, listeners, if you haven't watched it, go watch or listen and hear the spoilers. Art basically is like, okay, like I'm good. I'm done. What did you make of that? Like he was just gonna sit in that attic of that house and...
Yeah, I think he was just waiting. For me, I felt like it was a nod to Halloween, because Michael Myers always goes home, and also a nod to Christmas Vacation, because the attic scene, when Clark Griswold, the whole family leaves, he's accidentally locked himself in the attic, so he has no choice but to sit there and wait. And so I was like, oh, that's very clever. I do have to say, I love how Damien Leone includes nods to like so many horror and other types of movies throughout the films. They're a lot of fun to see. I find it very entertaining. But yeah, I just feel like he was like, just gotta wait it out.
Like Black Christmas. I took it as a nod to Black Christmas when the girl is in the attic.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that I totally didn't even think about that, but you are right. I mean, the attic theme happens a a lot in Christmas movies, whether they're horror or not. But yeah, I felt like he and Vicky were like, okay, we just gotta wait now, bide our time and wait until something stirs us up, I guess you could say.
What did you think of the Vicky storyline?
So in the sense of evil has to continue on, I thought it was really clever. It almost was like a if you can't beat them, join them type of thing, because you feel very sympathetic for her character in the first Terrifier because you've seen how she's been disfigured and all of these things that happen, and then you realize what she's done to the newscaster or, you know, the interviewer. And then it's kind of like, okay, something's really wrong with her. And then Terrifier 2, the scene in the mental health facility, which once again, that's another nod to the Brood when she's birthing Art's head, right? It's like, okay, then she is very much connected and aligned here with Art. The one thing that I thought was really strange was the clown girl. Like, she's in Terrifier 2, but then she gone. Like, I was just like, okay, because there wasn't any closure on that. Like, she was there and she was gone. And I was like, okay. So maybe she'll come back up in Terrifier 4. Who knows?
Well, I feel like, because this is like your wheelhouse, I feel like you're also touching on how we talk about different types of movies.
Mm-hmm.
They have more loose story because Damon Leone's art is the horror of it.
Yeah.
And so it almost feels like he knows what he wants to do, like with the kills, and then he builds the story around it, where in other storytellers, they're building the world and the story, and then what comes around it, where it feels like with Damien Leone, it's, I got this great character and he's sadistic and he's gonna kill people, and I've got this heroine that's on her hero's journey, and I'm just gonna kind of see how it comes together. It reminds me of imaginary play, like when we're kids and we're playing imaginary and the story just kind of grows and it goes this way or that way, where it's not this, we're gonna play the game of life and we're gonna set out on this.
It is very imaginative, and I enjoy that things that we associate with joy and fun are given like a vile tone, because it really, I think that's part of what appalls people so much, right? So Terrifier 1, I feel like, was totally a cult film. Like, if you saw it, you were a horror fan. Like, you knew what to expect. You knew what was up.
That's how we bonded. Really quick, viewers and listeners in our program, and correct me if I'm remembering this wrong, I'm pretty sure, like in our first class, Anna made a comment about, wasn't it Terrifier? And I think it was like, oh yeah, hey, okay, we speak the same language. And I don't think anybody else in class spoke that language, because I think you were like, hey, I love horror. And I was like, me too. And she was like, Terrifier? And it was like, yep. And so it was like, okay, like, we are kindred spirits.
Yes, absolutely. We were like, aha, found one, you know, because I think that there's a very broad spectrum of horror fans, but when you can mention at the time a very cult classic film to someone and they know what you're talking about, it's just like, you found the golden egg, you know what I mean? Like, oh yes, someone who understands. And that's the mystery of Art in the first one was so great, because like, who is he? Why is he doing this? What's going on? And that's what made it so fantastic too, was like, okay, you don't really know what's going on, but in the best way possible.
Yes. And I think that's probably why the first one is my favorite, because we don't know and we just have this killer clown. And then we get to the other ones where, so for you, like, what do you make? Because Damon Leone, maybe not the first one so much, but then we get into the second one, and especially the third one, where he's starting to pull in more religious themes. What do you make of this growth or new storyline that we're seeing in the art stories.
I feel like it's definitely good versus evil. I think also, like, we've talked a lot about different movies that have religiosity. Religion is a very difficult topic for a lot of people. And so to use something that's already a difficult area of discussion or topic to essentially appall someone, it's very, in my opinion, very efficient and effective in inciting a repulsion reaction, which is what you want in a horror movie. Like, you want to be grossed out, you want to be shocked, you want to jump, you want to laugh at the fact that you were just all of those things. And I think he's done that very well. What's your perspective?
I was really curious. I agree with you. It's good versus evil, and I just, I'm like, this is getting really interesting. It felt like the third one had more religious symbolism, that it's increasing, especially towards the end. And I was like, okay, because we have the pits of hell opening up, I'm assuming. I don't know, I could be wrong. And it feels like, I can't think of our main character's name, that
Sienna.
she starts, she's like a fallen angel, or maybe she is an angel and she doesn't know that, like, that's her purpose. It's just really interesting, the character arcs, which I did not predict to happen. So I give these films credit for having these arcs where art is getting more bolder and more graphic, and our characters are going ways that we did not think.
And it's always something different too. Like, it's like you said, it's like, oh, okay. And there are certain things, like the third one, of course, is the most recent. And I had a few things that stood out to me, and I really want to know your opinion. Okay, so Sienna's cousin is on her maternal side. Terrifier 2 leads us to believe that her metaphysical prowess comes from her paternal side. So then I'm like, why exactly is Art taking her cousin to the pits of hell? This kid's not going to have a chance because she has no metaphysical capabilities, right? Because she's on the other side of the family. Also, I strongly believe that Jonathan is alive. Those were just his glasses. That could have been anybody's skull. And from the looks of it, it was bleached and cleaned quite some time ago. If he would have just killed him, it probably would have been a little bit more gory looking.
I agree with you. Like, I don't think either one of us are ready for Jonathan actually to be dead. I'm hopeful, even if he is dead, that he can come back, because this is the Terrifier universe. Anything is possible. We got ghost girls that disappear. We've got women being consumed by evil, birthing heads. So anything is possible. And I'm with you. I took that more as, right, because I was like, okay, it doesn't make sense for him to take the cousin. I was like, well, maybe there has something to do with, like, being female or something, because they are cousins, and so he knows this is a way to get to her. Like, I'm gonna take your cousin who you really care about, who
what if her cousin is actually Terrifier girl from the second one, and she was time traveling back, like it was a Terminator moment?
Ooh, maybe, because what I'm with you, I'm like, what happened to that storyline? And again, we know in Terrifiers we are not getting always a storyline that makes sense, because again, this is little kid imaginary play. No offense, Damon Leone, because imaginary play is wonderful. As adults, we need to do it way more. It gets shunned, and I love seeing that stream of consciousness imaginary play that gets not as restricted as maybe other people.
Absolutely. And I do have to correct myself. We do find out in Terrifier 2 that she was 10 or 11 and she was murdered at the Carnival Adventure Park where the Terrifier ride is. So it could not be cousin. It just popped in my brain. I was like, oh, wait. But I do have one other theory too. And this is... It's a little salacious, I guess, because when I share it with people, they either are like, whoa, or they get really angry. So if you're listening, it's going to be one or the other. I have a theory that Art is actually Sienna's father. I think that due to whatever was going on with his mental, physical, physiological, spiritual health, caused him to be abusive to the family unit in some way, shape, or form towards the end. And that's how he's come back as Art the Clown. Because somehow that's transferred into this entity. And because he was always saying things to the effect of, I'm giving you tools to work with. This is you, right? How better to test that theory than to implement behavior and actions and see what she's made of, right? And I know that's very demented, but this is a horror film. Like, this is a trope that we sometimes see. But I really strongly believe that there's some sort of connection. Even if Art is not her father, there is some sort of connection between Sienna's dead father and Art.
Ooh, that is profound. And I appreciate that because I feel like you touch on as we're talking about horror films and tropes and that how Terrifier follows these lines, part of horror movie tropes and horror movies at their core. Yes, it's changing and there are horror movies that defy this. There is a key misogynistic component to horror movies where the women are being brutalized, the women are being hurt, they're being told by a male perspective. And so I feel like that fits where horror often is, that we see the strength in women because they are being hurt by men. Now, is Sienna going to be the new final girl where she defies history, where she is the final girl because of herself? Because also historically, which is fascinating, that final girls, as we're like, yay, final girls, they often are somehow saved or assisted by a male character. So that reflection of society where the final girls, that little kind of like, not misogynistic, but like, oh, they still need men's help to survive.
Absolutely. Well, and even if we look at movies of yesteryear, you know, is this going to be a final girl situation like Friday the 13th? You know, final girl in opening scene and that's it. And then we have a whole new plot line that we're exposed to.
A new final girl, like the Screams, right? If we go with, okay, we had our final girl, Sidney Prescott, until the newer films, and then we have our new final girl. It gives the films longevity if you are recycling out your final girl and you're getting a larger audience, because then you get a younger final girl that will appeal to younger audiences. I don't know. I know Damon Leone is huge about crowdfunding. That is part of how Terrifiers came into the world. And do you know which one? Because I believe he crowdfunded, was it 2 or 3? And I feel like he allowed people to really have a say. Like, how bloody do you want this film to be? Like, how...
Yeah, I want to say it was 2 because that's how it, and I could be wrong. Listeners, please correct us. But I think that's how it actually got into theatrical release. And it became so sensationalized that they actually got like studio bucks for 3. And people just lost their minds over the second one and the third one. And this is terrible. They weren't as gory as I expected. Honestly, like I was just like, okay, when I watched them.
Wow.
Because
that, like, I was gonna ask you, because that's part of, I feel like we have to talk on the sensationalism of the Terrifier movies and all the hype that went around these movies and all the stories about people, like you even said, like throwing up. I shared with you when we went to see, there was a family, they had like 2 kids, I don't know, like 8 or 10 or something. And I remember thinking, what? They left within like the first 10 minutes. And I believe while we were there is maybe, it wasn't a full theater, let's say maybe 7 to 10 groups of people, 3 sets of people, including the family with the kids, walked out. And I I was really, what
Yeah.
do you make of the sensation that happens with Terrifier movies and other movies
Mhm.
where
I
people don't believe the hype, or like you're like, I listened to the hype and then the hype took away from
mhm.
the gore.
Yeah, and I think it really depends where you find yourself on that horror fandom spectrum. Um, the best way I can compare it is in my previous career life, I worked in jewelry. I am what you could call like a diamond and gemstone expert. So for me, I'm like, oh yeah, it's a diamond, whatever. Like I look at these all day, every day. Yeah. But to someone who's getting a piece of jewelry, or has never held one in their hand before, they're like, oh my God, look at this rainbow sparkle. It's beautiful. It's like little bursts of confetti coming at me, which I think is a great experience for someone. But the more you work with something, the more desensitized you become, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I think with horror, if you haven't seen something this level of gore, if you've never seen like any of the 70s movies, like if you've never seen I Spit on Your Grave, the original Nightmare on Elm Street, any of those type of movies, and you go to watch this, you're going to be getting a lot thrown at you at one time. But I would say probably to Margaret and myself, and a lot of people listening, we have seen those movies gajillions of times. We're familiar with like Tom Savini-esque type of special effects. This is what we want. This is what we came for. So to me, I'm like, oh, what a creative kill, but haha, that's like so fake. The special effects artist is awesome. And so I think from that perspective, it's very different, whereas someone who prefers like drama movies, but they're like, oh, I'm going to go see it. Everybody's talking about it. They're going to have a totally different experience than someone who is an avid horror fan.
Yes. Ooh, thank you. I appreciate that. That people, they just buy into the hype. Oh my gosh. Or even people saying like, I'm so tough, so I'm
Mhm.
gonna go see this movie and not. So right, there's like recreational fear,
Mhm.
and the three types of
Yeah.
people that engage in it is like the white knuckler, the person that's just gonna, I'm just gonna get through, the
Yeah.
adrenaline junkie who's in it for the thrill, and then the dark coper, the one that like has some mental health stuff and they use it to
Mhm.
help with the mental health
Yeah.
challenges. And it feels like there's people that aren't in that world. They are
Mhm.
outside of recreational fear
Yes.
world. And so then they're coming in and they don't even, so they're unprepared. Like, I can
Yeah.
watch this, it's no big deal. No, you can't, because Terrifier movies are meant to gross you out. They are
Yeah.
meant, he is pushing buttons. He's like, how can I shock you? How can I gross you out? How can I push the envelope?
Mhm.
And I so appreciate how you touch on, for horror fans, we are looking for that. That is something we're
Mhm.
like, yes, we're compared to movies like, I
Yeah.
don't think you've seen it. I Saw the Devil, which is a Korean movie that has more realistic horror
Mhm.
and it's psychological. I feel like that one bothered me way more because I was like, this man is, it's, it
Yeah.
takes out the cheese factor of Terrifier and gets to
Mhm.
somebody who's angry that this killer killed his pregnant wife. And basically the whole movie, he catches the serial killer, tortures him, lets him go, catches him, lets him go. And by the end of the movie, you're like, just kill the poor dude.
Yeah.
Kill the poor killer, let him go. Where Terrifier, I feel like you're
Mhm.
like, how are you entertaining us?
Yeah.
What are you doing? How are you going to creatively kill somebody and
Mhm.
creatively show us
Yeah.
this?
Absolutely. Well, and I feel like even the recreational watchers, right? I think that we all gravitate between those three identities of being
Mm-hmm.
a recreational watcher, and that's part of the fun and joy in it. I do have to ask you, what is your favorite kill in the Terrifier movies, since we're on the subject, and which one just completely like grossed you out, and why?
I knew you were going to ask that, and I've been trying to think, like, what is my favorite kill and which one totally just grossed me out. I
Uh-huh.
will start with shower scene in 3, I really thought it was going to be grosser. So if we talk about hype a movie gets, this scene got a lot of hype. And then I was like, I mean, yeah, it was gross, but it wasn't like, ew. I feel like what grossed me out the most was Victoria and her in 3, and just her grossness, and just she exuded like ew. I have to think about. I loved the mall scene in 3.
Yes.
I just thought that one was so entertaining, so I will go with the mall scene in 3. Okay. How about you?
I do have to say the mall scene in 3 is great. It kind of reminded me of the beginning of Krampus. It's great social commentary. I would say, well, I know what my definite grossest one, which is very strange, but to me it's in Terrifier 2, the piss scene, not when the guy's taking a piss, but in the laundromat when he sees Terrifier girl. Because my immediate thought was, oh, somebody's gonna have to clean that up. And like, I just was like, oh, that's where my mind went. Favorite kill is like a tough one. I would probably say Terrifier 2 again. Sienna and Jonathan's mom, just because it doesn't just happen. Like, Art kills her, and then the mashed potato scene, which to me wasn't really gory at all, but it was very creative. So, and I felt like Art was doing like a 2 bird 1 stone. He was scaring everything he could out of Jonathan, and then he also, gets him to be captive. So I was like, what, way to accomplish multiple goals at one time.
Yes, and thank you for turning out how creative these movies are. And viewers, listeners, what's your favorite kill? What's your least favorite kill? What to you was the grossest kill in these movies? And share with us. Is Jonathan dead? Is Jonathan alive? What happened to Cousin? What do you want to happen with our protagonist? What are some ideas for Art's next kill?
Absolutely. Wow. I'm glad that you mentioned that, because is there anything specifically you would like to see in Terrifier 4?
That is a great question. I'm curious where he's going with Sienna's story. I think we know where it is. It's very good versus evil, like almost cliche-ish to me. So I'm curious what he's going to do with that. I kind of want to get back to old gritty. I think that's what I missed in 3.
Yeah.
That 1 had. It was gritty. It had this cult classic sense. So it had this almost like when you watch a good found footage film and you feel like you're watching something you're not supposed to be watching, and you're like excited about it. I want to get back to those Art roots where I'm like, I want to watch Art and I don't want to watch Art. As I feel like in 3, I was kind of like, okay, come on, Art, what are you doing? I want to get back to what are you doing and why are you doing it?
Yeah.
How about you?
So I really would like to see, like we mentioned it earlier, a la Friday the 13th Part 2, where, we see our protagonist, but she's in the first 10 minutes of the film and it's a whole new storyline. The other thing that I really, really, really have requested, I posted it on Leon's Instagram and have requested this specifically. So if you're listening, I'm requesting this again. I want intestinal jump rope. So if any of you see Terrifier 4 and you see Art doing double dutch with guts, you heard it here first. And yeah, like you mentioned, some of the kills, like the chainsaw scene, I think too, at least for me, and Margaret, let me know if you feel the same way. Being thanatologists, we're very aware of the physiological aspects of death. So I'm like, well, that would not efficiently eviscerate someone. That's not how that happens. But I really wished Art would have ripped the guy's leg off and beat him with it. I would have been so pleased to see that, because to me that's like very creative and totally different.
Yes.
Like very like troglodyte type behavior, and it would have been fun.
Mm-hmm.
Just something like
Yes.
really different, you know?
Yes. Oh, I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And of course, like, you come up with all these like really creative nicknames for characters in movies. And I don't know, listeners, we're not going to share ours yet. You let us know if you thought of any funny nicknames when you were watching these movies. Because I know I've thought of a few. Did you think of a few too, Margaret?
No.
Oh.
Now I'm gonna have to watch them and think of some.
Oh my god. Oh. But yeah, I mean, I think too, just from if we really look at Terrifier 2 and Terrifier 3 in particular, I think that Terrifier 2 is a huge grief film. Obviously, Sienna and Jonathan and their mother are dealing with the loss of their dad, as well as the trauma from him pre-death and what was going on with his situation. I think that even art on some level was going through change because Terrifier Girl shows up, right? And this is like totally like, oh, someone who actually understands me, somebody who's going to team up and help me. So I think that was probably an adjustment for him. And then when we're looking at Terrifier 3, this is to me very much a trauma movie, because there's a specific scene when she's in the cafeteria at university talking to Jonathan when well, here comes one of my nicknames I made up, when Chainsaw Tits approaches. And so I know that's not politically correct, but I mean, come on, if you've seen the movie, it fits. And she's like, oh my god, Sienna, why don't you come on my podcast? Why don't you do this? Blah 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 blah. And Sienna just explodes, right? Rightfully so. Like, someone's approaching, they're not empathetic to the trauma that she has been through. Like, she's lost her dad, she's seen all these horrific things happen to her mother, her friends, very traumatizing things, and this girl is just treating it like it's entertainment.
Because it is, right? If like that's what you're touching on, is that we live in a society that makes entertainment out of other people's traumas, out of other people's misfortunes, all the crime shows, all the podcasts. There's so many that are like, hey, you've had this misfortune and now I'm going to use it as entertainment. And I do appreciate that he did that in the third and poked fun at how that does happen, how people like you're saying, Chainsaw Tits was like, just let me capitalize off of you.
Lack of empathy, lack of thought. And you're right, it speaks to that mentality within our society that, oh well, I've read about you, I've talked about you, I don't really give credence to what you're going through as an individual, but I want to know about you, I want to use you for my own benefit.
Yes. And then how people do that and they feel entitled to it.
Absolutely.
I've read about you, I know your whole story, so now I'm entitled to more. And you're like, no.
I kind of have to say though, just from like a grief, like a thanatology perspective, even though this is not behavior that I condone in real life, in movie world, I kind of wish Sienna would have punched her.
She would deserve that. Like,
totally. And I didn't feel bad at all. Like, that's one thing I will give credit, particularly the second and third movies. The characters that get killed, for the most part, are not very likable. So it's kind of like, okay, you know, like another one bites the dust. I think in the first one, the friend with the phone that's kind of being rude to Art, she's not super likable, but you know, the other two female protagonists and also the mentally ill lady with the doll, they're all reasonably okay, if even likable.
Yeah, I wonder if we're seeing like Damien Leone's growth as a storyteller, because as audiences, you can get backlash when a likable character dies and it does not make sense to the audience. And knowing audiences like that reward of, I didn't like that person and it felt good for that person to die, then wait, I like that character and you just killed them for no reason. Now I'm upset.
Yeah. And yeah, I feel like in the third one, like I was just I was more bummed out about like the like what were they, like the construction or utility workers that went into the house. I was like, oh, I know what's gonna happen to you guys and you're just trying to do your job. But some of the other ones, it was just like, okay.
Yeah. I agree.
Yeah. And I think that particularly again in the third one, this overlying tone of lack of empathy for people who have been in a traumatic situation or experienced traumatic events. So Sienna leaves the facility to spend the holiday with her aunt, uncle, and cousin. And I feel like immediately the uncle is kind of skeptical to start with. And it's kind of like, well, you know what she's been through. How do you expect her to behave?
I was wondering with that, like, if he was putting or projecting onto her some of his own issues with her dad. I'm guessing as a family, knowing that her dad struggled with mental health and then not wanting to deal with her. So like, okay, yeah, I'm going to ignore her trauma because she's like her dad. She just has mental health issues and not giving her that space.
Yeah. If you ignore it, you don't have to face it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Idea.
We'll just pretend like we're fine. It's the holidays. So I feel like you're touching on something we discussed during the holidays is how often people are like, well, we know you got trauma. We know you have grief. It's the holidays. So those aren't invited to the party. Of course they're invited because they're parts of us. They're tethered to us.
Right. I mean, they're going to show up whether you invite them or not. So
yes.
Absolutely. Well, and I do have to ask you, in all three films, who do you feel like you most identify with? Just, of all three and all the characters that we meet and experience.
I don't know. I don't, because 3 has a lot of unlikable characters except the construction worker. So then I'd be like the construction worker because I'm just showing up doing. I don't know, the construction worker. I'm showing up doing my job, and sometimes in life we show up to do our job and shit happens.
Yeah,
how about you?
Yes, I would say the first Terrifier, Vicky. Throughout the storyline, not when she is, murderous at the end, but when we see her and she's like, oh great, my sister and her friend have gotten in trouble, I gotta go rescue them, let me stop what I'm doing and go take care of everyone else. And definitely I thought that her character was very relatable. I that in a lot of dynamics, whether it's family, friends, work, there's someone who always ends up being like the parent of the group. And so I really identified with that. Obviously not so much birthing a live head in Terrifier 2 or enjoying shattered glass in Terrifier 3, but the first one, yeah, she's kind of relatable.
Or even her in Terrifier 3, the scene where we forgot, trigger warning, where she rapes herself, because I forgot that after the movie, I walked by some teenagers that had made it, and the girl was like, what the, like, she was processing that scene, like, she was like, that was so gross, and I was like, yeah, I am like with her. She's like with her boyfriend, he's just kind of like, and she's like, no, like, come on, like, ew, no. And that felt graphic, and I don't know about you, like almost like the misogynistic undertones of lack of respect for the female body, and as a woman being like, we would not do that to our bodies.
Not at all. Well, and even to me, I was like, is this supposed to show that she's part of like the evil now, that not only does she get off on the pain of others, but she's getting off on any sort of pain, no matter what it does to her or at what cost. And the fact that like at the end, Art was like, cool. I was just like, no. I mean, you know, it's just a bit extreme. Yeah.
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 I agree. That was just extreme and hard
definitely.
to watch.
It was different. No, that's, I think it was different. But yeah, I mean, it didn't have to do with anything other than, well, and I guess really the evil perspective is, you know, one from like the hyper religious, you know, self pleasure is a sin and evil to start with, and you know, maybe that was just it at like an exacerbated level, like exacerbated masturbation, you know what I mean? Like maybe it's like, oh, okay, well, this is something that you're not supposed to do anyway, let's make it really bad, to display how evil she is.
Ooh, as a wonder, we've been talking about tropes, that male creators often are more violent with female bodies than they are with male bodies sexually. Like they are violent with male bodies, often not sexually. And then we have movies that break that. We could think of like Deliverance or films that are going to be sexually violent towards the male body by a male creator. Often male creators are more testosterone violent towards male bodies and rape violent towards female bodies, which is culturally how men have been conditioned. You fight other men, you take women.
Yeah, absolutely. Just like Jordan Chase from Dexter, just take it. Very much, yeah, you can see that in some of the films. And I think that part of that adds to the disgust, like whether you're a horror fan or not, just like, oh, okay. So, I mean, it's definitely very effective.
Yes.
Well, I'm excited for the next one to come out, obviously. Are you excited too?
Yeah, I'm excited. We'll see where they go. I'm curious. I think I'm more curious than excited. We got some big ones coming out this year that
it's kind of
stay
like,
tuned, listeners. We'll be talking about the ones coming out this year.
Yeah, it's kind of like when Baskin Robbins comes out with a new flavor. Like they come out with a new one ever so often. You know it's coming, but you don't know what it's going to be. That's Terrifier is like the ice cream shop of horror. Delicious.
There we go. I like that.
Yes. Well, listeners, let us know your thoughts on art and all of the things that we discussed. And make sure that you eat your coffin cookies, drink your bruja brew, howl at the moon, and until next time, we'll see you soon.
Don't forget to like, subscribe, follow, comment. Thank you for watching and listening. And yes, we'll see you next time.